makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part.
Megan McArdle is a Washington Post columnist who is self described as a kind of right leaning libertarian. She is also the author of a book called The Upside of Down, which I vaguely recall the Chapo Trap House did a very, very funny and very, very good debunking of, and apparently it's really terrible. But anyway, she made a tweet that I think kind of synthesizes what a lot of the U.S. kind of upper middle classes and upper classes think about welfare and healthcare, and why they try and find excuses why it shouldn't be implemented. So let's look at this tweet. So the uh, the reply to this tweet is another series of comments to a tweet by Matt Iglesias. And Matt Iglesias, if you don't know who he is, he's probably the single stupidest journalist alive today. I really think that's the case. There are bad journalists because they're ideologues and they're partisans. You know, deliberately mislead what they say. They serve corporate interests or they serve whatever interests. But Matt Iglesias is just genuinely stupid. And yet he is one of the main faces of Vox. I don't know if he still works there, but he's basically one of the faces of this kind of explainy style of journalism that liberal centrists absolutely love. Because centrism is not an ideology, it's a pathology of thinking that you're the only reasonable, rational ones on the planet and everyone else is a radical extremist. And Matt Iglesias just fills in that niche very perfectly, except he's just not bright. That's the fact. I don't know of any journalist who has such consistently bad takes as Matt Iglesias, save for perhaps Thomas Friedman. Except Thomas Friedman, we all know he's basically a paid shill for corporate interests. But Matt Iglesias, I just don't know why he's a thing, why he exists. Anyway, just look at this absolutely brain dead tweet. I don't think the American left is going to get far until it can acknowledge that average living standards in this country are actually very high, and that's the appropriate context in which to think about specific problems. So, I mean, every single problem in the US must part from the fact that, hey, actually, you're very wealthy. So maybe you just shouldn't complain about your lack of healthcare since you're so wealthy that, I don't know, only 40% of Americans can spare $400 for a medical emergency. Who cares? Country's already so wealthy. This is the bullshit that I basically debunked in 300 pages in my book, The Glass Half Empty, which I will link to in the description. If you like this channel, buy that book. You will not regret it. It's basically the anti-Steven Pinker book. Anyway, so this led to a series of, to a conversation in which at some point Megan McArdle jumps in and says another way to put this is that they would like to have the welfare state amenities of Denmark without giving up the consumption amenities of an American upper middle class household that, for example, assumes one bedroom and one bathroom per household member plus ample closets. So first and foremost, why do you need one bedroom and one bathroom per household member if you have like 4 kids? That's kind of pushing it. Now, it is true that like this is ridiculous. It's like, oh, I guess we're just not gonna want to have universal health care and deal with, stupid private insurance companies. Have a medical emergency and an ambulance is gonna come, and I don't know how I'm gonna pay the ambulance because if it's not part of my insurance policy, then I'm gonna end up paying like, I don't know, God knows how many thousands just for the ambulance ride. Just because I want a bigger closet. That's how stupid this mentality is. And then she goes, so here's the thing, like you can frame this original tweet as just being, look, I'm not saying this because I believe it. I'm saying this because that's what other people think. So, on that premise, this tweet in itself is not necessarily bad. She's kind of explaining why upper middle class Americans might not want to have healthcare. So, let's just part from that premise that this original tweet is not wrong per se and doesn't reflect her views. But then it's her responses that, just makes her completely dig an argumentative hole. So, I don't know if she's ever left the US. I don't know if she's actually lived in Europe, and if she's lived in Europe, maybe she just stayed in a tiny hotel in a city center. But she says, if you live in Denmark, you don't have to worry about healthcare expenses or schooling. Also, your home is small and poorly heated by US standards, and you use your family-friendly work schedule to do the household chores that a US upper middle class family would pay to outsource. That's the deal. Well, first and foremost, if you don't need to live in like a friggin' McMansion or some 5-bedroom suburban house in the US, you do less chores. That's the beauty of living in a smaller house. You do less chores. You can actually do them without outsourcing them. But here's the problem. She just assumes that everyone in Europe lives in like a tiny shoebox apartment. And yes, that might be true in like central London or central Paris or some of the other city centers. But does she not realize that Europe is, pretty suburbanized as well? Do you not realize that once you leave central Paris, once you leave the périphérique, it's mostly single family dwellings as far as the eye can see? Did you know that the first city that the city that invented suburbs was London? Go to fucking Google Maps. Just go to fucking Google Maps and just see any major European city. And you will see perhaps not the obscene sprawl that you see in the US, but you mostly see single family dwellings outside the city center. That's just normal. And then, as you leave the city center, you go to smaller towns. That's the norm. Now, here's the data. She could have just bothered looking at the data. Now, a couple of years ago, there was I wouldn't say scandal because it didn't change anything, but it turns out the UK does have the smallest homes in the Western Hemisphere. Sorry, in Western Europe. This was a study done by the University of Cambridge, and they found out that new build homes in the UK are only 76 square meters. But here's Denmark, 137 square meters. That's the average new build Danish home. Please tell me you can't raise a family in a 137 square meter home. Please. I really, really want to know what exactly you need beyond this. And, these are all pretty decently sized homes, I must say. I mean, the aberration is the US that has homes way, way bigger than they need. Which is terrible from an urbanistic perspective because that means your cities are much bigger than what they should be. If you go, I love Google Maps and I just love sort of exploring the world through them. Here's a good comparison. San Antonio, Texas, and Lyon, France have very similar populations, very similar ones. Go to Google Maps and see the size of San Antonio and then compare with Lyon. And San Antonio is like more than 4 times bigger in terms of the extent of the urban mass than Lyon. Now, what does this mean? Does this mean that everyone in Lyon lives in a tiny apartment? No, that's not true. They do live in smaller homes. But guess what? Everything is closer in Lyon. You can walk to a store. You can just take a small bus ride somewhere, pretty much anywhere in the city, rather than have to go through some giant beltway all the way around. I'm sorry, this is more livable. No one in their right minds would want to live in San Antonio over Lyon, France. That's a fact. I'm sorry. And if you don't believe me, visit Lyon, France one day and then compare it to your average American city. Trust me, you will want to live there. Anyway, coincidentally, I must say, what is it about these welfare states that make bigger homes? How is it that hyper-capitalist UK happens to have the smallest homes? Mostly because home building has been deregulated ever since Thatcher, and homes have gotten smaller, 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 and smaller. Actually, homes in London, like sort of Victorian era homes, sort of near the city center, are surprisingly big. They're very narrow, but they're usually 3 stories, plus the former servants' quarters, which are at the bottom, and which nowadays usually is a separate flat. But as a whole, those homes are big. They used to build bigger homes than they do now. These tiny shoeboxes are the new builds, which now London is just flooded with all these new build apartments that are just tiny, tiny, tiny. So she has no fucking idea what she's talking about here. No fucking idea. Yeah, so you live in Denmark, you don't worry about healthcare expenses, schooling, your home is small and poorly heated by US. This is the weirdest bit. Poorly heated. These Europeans must be, cowering under the radiator in the middle of winter. This is just ridiculous. What is she's never been to Europe. She's never been to Europe. She's never been in a European home during winter. I have spent winters in numerous European countries, including very cold ones like Norway. And I can assure you that in none of them was I ever cold inside a dwelling. So why is she inventing this? This is what is mind-boggling. Why is she inventing this? Just to make her case against why Americans are just so much better off at having those bigger, warmer homes than these Europeans who have schooling, healthcare, childcare, all these things for free. This is beyond ridiculous. And I should add, if you're upper middle class in the US, you would probably be upper middle class in Europe as well, which means you could afford one of these bigger homes. Or you could afford like a relatively large apartment in a city center, because not all of them are tiny. So you could afford this. Anyway. Yeah. Let's see some of the other replies. But partial agree, but its healthcare system is vastly more wasteful and inequitable. Many would make that trade in a minute. Yeah, I think most would do that. And she responds, seems worth noting that most Americans like their own health insurance. They just worry about losing it. Well, that's a pretty damn important consideration, because a lot of the reasons why Americans don't quit their jobs is because their health insurance is tied to their jobs. So they're afraid of giving up, any potential benefit from that. And also, they still fleece you. Even just having healthcare doesn't guarantee that having health insurance doesn't guarantee that you'll get good healthcare in the US. That was the whole point of the Michael Moore movie. I forget the name of it. I really like how it began. Like, this is a story not about people who don't have health insurance. This is a story about people who do. That doesn't mean they want to trade for an uncertain government-run program. Yeah, a government, it's very certain, because we have every single freaking country in Western Europe with one of these programs, and it works. And guess what? In the US, you also have a government-run program called Medicare, and guess what? It works. It just doesn't apply to everyone. Yeah. This is so incorrect, I don't even know where to start. Poorly heated. What? As if every house doesn't have a smart thermostat. Oh, and I use my family-friendly work schedule to spend time with my family. If I need to shop, I can walk or cycle with kids. No comparison. By American standards, European homes are cold. So she doubles down. She offers no evidence that this is factually correct. And in most temperate areas, unbearable in the summer. This is mental. This is just mental. Yeah, this is ridiculous. You must be thinking British homes. I assure you that Scandinavian homes are not cold in winter. Scandinavians I know sneer at Americans set thermostat at 70 in the winter, but indisputably it costs more to heat and power your home outside of Norway. Yeah, this is also the thing. Like Americans are obsessed, and I know this as someone who has lived in the US, uh, are obsessed with in winter, like it has to be almost like summer temperature inside your home. And then during summer, it has to be like winter temperature inside your home or uh inside stores. Stores are probably the worst offenders. Trust me, as someone who lived in New York City, New York City summers are absolutely insane. And then you walk into any store, any freaking store, and it's like a freaking blizzard from the air conditioning. Like there's no concept in the US of just having like, oh, we're gonna use the air conditioner just so that it's slightly not even cold, just slightly colder. Just make it bearable inside. That's the whole point of it. And the same with heating. The whole point is to just make the house pleasant. It doesn't mean you have to like sweat indoors during winter. So I'm sorry, the European mentality of tolerating a bit more heat and tolerating a bit more cold in the respective seasons is, I think, very much justified and also very much more environmentally friendly. Oh God, I don't know what to say. This is just ridiculously stupid and just ridiculously. I mean, she's getting a lot of flack for these stupid comments. Yeah, why would a Dane be interested in heating their house to American standards? I've heard European travelers compare about how hot American houses are in winter and how cold in summer. I didn't say they should. I merely said that revealed preferences suggest Americans prefer it. Uh, and then you may prefer the trade-off. I think is the morally superior choice, but the fact remains it is a trade-off. Yeah, everything's a fucking trade-off, but there's better trade-offs. Okay, there's better trade-offs. Uh, and also, she's she's stating these things like she's trying to back down and saying like, well, it's not what I think, it's what other people think. But she's doubling down. She's defending these views. So I don't know. I've seen. Why do these people exist? Really, just why do these people exist? And honestly, Megan, I suggest one day, 1 year of your life, you spend a winter in Europe, not in a tiny shoebox flat in the middle of London, or a tiny little houseman apartment in France, but a normal average home in Denmark. Uh, and you enjoy the winter and you stop complaining and you realize why actually this is a damn good trade-off. A damn good trade-off. Because this is just the excuse that they want to give. Oh, we need to have all the benefits, or let's just have none of them, which is absolutely stupid and ridiculous. So on that note, if you like this video, please like, please share, most importantly, please subscribe, and I'll see you next time.